This episode is brought to you by Rune. Click the link in the description box below for more information.
Finally, we get to the third video and final video in this series about entry-level DACs. Now, my definition of entry-level is below about $750/euros. Your definition might be different. It might be 500, it might be 200, it might be 2,000. That's also cool, but it doesn't affect the content of this video, because today we're going to be talking about the Denafrips Ares II, which I think sells direct from a dealer in Singapore, but also from, now they've got handlers in the EU and the USA. And I think it comes in at 680 euros the last time I checked. So that's what we're talking about today, Denafrips Ares II. But before we get going properly, I want you to think back to my previous video about the Bluesound Power Node and the KEF KC62, in which I said that I have a bit of an aversion, or I'm very sensitive to DACs or hi-fi systems or sounds that have a little bit too much top-end air bite. If you don't know what that means, I'm very sorry. Just, I guess, think about it like an insistent treble, but not just the upper treble, more like the lower treble, upper mids. That's sort of where the crisp crunch lives, the presence region, but the very upper end of the presence region. I am sensitive to that particular area. I think many people are. I don't like it when it's too etched, or too, I don't want to use the word bright, but too keen. I like ease in that region. I like a sound that allows me to relax into music. So please bear this in mind as we move forward with our coverage of, once again, the Denafrips Ares II. So it's a very plain pedestrian looking black box. It doesn't really look like much, does it? And it's just a DA converter. So digital audio comes in from your network streamer or your CD player or your digital source or your computer, and then it gets converted into analog to go out to an amplifier. That's all this does. There's no headphone output. There's no MQA support. Yes, it does do high res out the wazoo. Do I really care about that? Not really. DSD, the same. Yes, it does it. Do I care? No. So as with the other two videos, I have had this DAC connected to a Raspberry Pi 4's USB output. No, I am not using any SPDIF hat or DAC hat in here. Just the USB output direct from the Raspberry Pi. I've also fed this DAC with a Logitech transporter, which is down there. I've also fed it with my Xiaomi Mi Box S, which is my TV video streamer for Netflix and Amazon Prime and YouTube. I've had that connected to the DAC over Toslink. Mix and matching all those things over the last 2 months, along with 2 different loudspeaker systems. So the GATO Amp 150 with the Wilson TuneTots, plus the Hegel H390 with the LS50 Meta. No subwoofer. How then do I assess this DAC's low bass? Well, that's why headphone listening is really, really important to me. Because if I'm not getting the low bass from any kind of review system, I need to come to headphones. Here I've got the Schiit Jotunheim 2 Meze Empyrean. Headphones are crucial for me when assessing upstream electronics. Crucial. Now, the reason I've opened this up is because this is like your dad's DAC, in that this is an R2R DAC, or a resistor ladder DAC. This is how DACs used to be made until Delta Sigma designs became more cost efficient for most manufacturers. We can see the resistor ladders here, 1 and 2, left and right channels. That means it's balanced. Balanced outputs on the back, real balanced. Before we get to there, that's the end of the chain, if you like, really, because it goes to the outputs here. At the start, we have power coming in, mains filter, transformer, power supply. And then here we have the USB input. This is a custom designed input. So it's coded by Denafrips on this chip. I forget the name of the chip, I'm sorry. Right next to it is an FPGA. And this controls the data that goes into these resistor ladders. And it does some cool things in that it also manages 2 different modes of operation. So we have a non-oversampling mode, but we also have an oversampling mode. That all takes place in this FPGA, feeding our resistor ladders and then again out through either balanced or single-ended outputs. It's a very nice, tidy design and not common at this kind of price point. I actually forgot one very important techie detail. Now the case is back on. I can't show you it, but that FPGA is used to clock all digital inputs coming in, and then it's clocked out of the FPGA using femto clocks. So if you're a femto clock enthusiast, that might be important for you. And there are 2 of them, I think, 1 for each sample rate family. So 1 for 44.1 and 1 for 48. So yeah, if you like to know that kind of thing, this information is for you. But for most people, it's probably irrelevant. This is a DAC for people who value reverb and decay on instruments, and I guess a greater sense of music's tone and timbre, music's color. So something like Joanna Newsom's YS has a tremendous amount of tonal color. That really comes through very nicely on this DAC. I will qualify this by saying or reminding you that the sound of a DAC is not as significant as the sound of your room, the sound of your loudspeakers, or the sound of your amplifier. Obviously with headphone listening, loudspeakers and room don't come into it. So actually in many ways, the Empyrean and the Jotunheim give me more of a sort of microscopic view of what's going on with DA conversion electronics. And for that reverb, decay, tonal color, timbre, this Ares II, I won't say it smokes or destroys or blows out of the water the Cambridge DACMagic, but it is better in those respects than the Cambridge DACMagic, which in turn I think gives us more detail retrieval. In many senses, this is a more, or gives us a more hyper-real take on the music, whereas the Ares II in NOS mode, in non-oversampling mode, is a little bit more sort of diffuse and vague. It doesn't etch player outlines as crisply as the DACMagic does. So for me, this is more like a digital camera. And this Ares II is more like an old film camera. Well, it doesn't even have to be old, just a film camera. And I thought about that and I thought, no, that's still a little bit too fuzzy. So what I arrived at was something even stranger for some people anyway. Some people are not on my wavelength. Is that this DAC, the DACMagic, think of it like fluorescent lighting in an office. Like everything's brilliantly lit and you can see around you, but it's not as comfortable to sit in an office with that kind of lighting for long periods. Whereas the Ares II is more like a room lit with an incandescent light bulb, like the old school sort of Edison bulbs, you know? So it's softer and it's easier to sit in a room, I think, with an incandescent light bulb than it is with fluorescent lighting for a longer time. you don't need the headphone output or the MQA support from the Cambridge DACMagic, then I thoroughly recommend you stump up the extra 180 euros for the Ares II. Because normally DAC comparisons, I could see how one group of people would like this model, another group of people would like another model, but I think in this particular case, more people would like the Ares II than the Cambridge DACMagic. Unless you're a detail freak, unless you like that sort of like hyper-real, ultra-high definition take on music, in which case you want this one. Because the Ares II is a little bit more diffuse and a bit softer in the top. Its presence region does not give us the crisp crunch that this one does. We're talking subtle differences here, but I'm teasing them out. And if the absence of that crisp crunch matters to you, as it does to me, because it lends music a greater sense of natural flow, like rhythmic flow, and this one sounds comparatively, a little bit more sort of like dynamically rigid in the joints. I think one of the fundamental reasons why the Ares II sounds more natural, and I'm guessing here, is because of that very sophisticated power supply, which I don't think the Cambridge DACMagic has. Again, I'm guessing, but this is linear, this is switch mode. Again, this is the trouble with talking about these kinds of things, is that not every linear power supply would sound better than every switch mode power supply. It depends on the implementation. But I'm just trying to give you my best guess as to why I think this Ares II sounds more natural, more easeful, more organic, offers greater tonality, timbre, just all of those sort of more natural qualities that I think for me, especially with acoustic music, right? Or with, like Kristen Hirsch's Hips and Makers, female vocal, stuff like that. I've already mentioned Joanna Newsom. Female singers in that presence region, they can get a bit sibilant at times. I never get that feeling from the Denafrips Ares II. It never makes me wince, not once. And I cannot say that about the DACMagic. I mean, obviously this is all very recording dependent, but I listen to a lot of music that isn't especially well recorded in my day-to-day. So I want something that's more forgiving. This one. If you listen to a lot of modern electronic music, indie rock, post-punk like I do, this one. But there's a twist, because you might think, well, I don't want a DAC that's diffuse and a little bit soft at the edges. With this one, you don't have to have that, because if we click the mute button, I've got to say this as well, like you have to sort of look at the DAC from an angle low down so you can see the LEDs, because it doesn't have those retina boiling LEDs that many products made in China do. Anyway, if we push the mute button and then opt 1, we can switch it in and out of NOS mode. So if it's not in NOS mode, it's in oversampling mode. Now this is the mode that I prefer. There are 2 filters. I prefer the slow roll-off filter, not the sharp roll-off. I found that a little bit sort of too uptight. But the slow roll-off filter in OS mode really tightens things up. So the player outlines that I talked about before, they become a lot more visible. We get a little bit more attack from dynamics. And best of all, we also get a little bit more flesh, a little bit more meat on the bone when oversampling mode is engaged here. It's not as soft or as opaque, comparatively speaking, as the NOS mode. But you have a choice, because I can see why, if you've got like a really sort of like ultra high definition hi-fi system, if your speakers are extremely revealing and like sometimes you're like, oh, maybe that's too much, then the NOS mode here might work for you. But I guess with my hardware, I want something a little bit more balanced, and the OS mode with the slow roll-off filter really does it for me. Absolutely fantastic. Now in my Cambridge DACMagic video, I brought out the Mojo. This compared to this, okay, so the Mojo is more detailed. It has a deeper soundstage. It contrasts the Ares II as a bit flat in the soundstage, and not as sort of revealing of the very tiny microscopic particles inside music. I'm not saying this is surgical, not at all, but it does reveal a lot of info. The Ares II doesn't quite go there, but for me it has more muscle, more punch, more meat, more flesh. Like it's just, I guess you would call it corporeal. Is that the right word? Corporeal, I think it is, or corporeal?
Corporeal.
You know, learning German is really f***ing with my my pronunciation of English words. But I think what makes this DAC's presentation of music so very interesting is that it comes without any hint of metallic sheen in that sort of lower treble, upper mid-range. Because nearly all DACs have it to a very tiny degree. Well, at the entry level they do anyway. Whereas this one, it's completely gone. And I think that makes this the DAC you should start with if you're cutting over from vinyl playback for the first time, because this DAC is the closest I've heard to my turntable setup, probably more so than any of the other two that I've reviewed, so the DACMagic and the iFi Zen. And I would go so far as to say that this is the most audibly agreeable DAC that I have heard so far at the sort of 700 and below US dollars, euros price point. It really is that good. If you like this video, please hit the like button down below. If you like my attitude towards high-end audio, in that sometimes some bits of gear like this really play to my own personal taste. I mean, very often I'll call out differences and let you guys decide which one works for you, and I've done that a bit today, but this Ares II really plays to the fact that I don't like any sort of hint of brightness or metallic sheen in the lower treble from any piece of audio gear. It really turns me off. I like a sort of smoother, richer, less glary presentation, and this plays closest to that, and which is amazing at its price point, really. So if you dig all of that, then please subscribe to this channel, and as always, thank you ever so much for watching.